Hey there, cycling junkies. What's going on? It's March, the sun is out, gravel is coming, spring is coming, crits are coming. I hope you're excited. I'm feeling a little bit better, and I'm excited that we're going to start riding bikes and racing bikes, and excited for 2019. We got a really cool show for you today, but before I get into the show, we'll start with our sponsors. So we'll start with Legacy Bikes. That's Legacy with an I, Legaci bikes.com. It's the place to get all your balance bike needs for your little ones. Spring's coming, get them outside, get them on the balance bike, and get them riding with Legacy. Todd'll hook you up. We're also sponsored by NYSBRA, the New York State Bicycle Racing Association. They're responsible for all the behind-the-scenes work for all the great bike racing that's going to happen in New York State in 2019. They got grants. They've got all kinds of great programs. They do the state championship events. They got the calendar for all the races up for the year. So go check them out at nysbra.com and give them a follow on Facebook. Lastly, we are sponsored by the Dirty Bikes Gravel Series. It's about a month away. We kick off on April 13th with the Ocean Giant featuring the GOAT, the man, the greatest. Jeremy Powers is coming back to town. We got a new course for you there. Anthony Clark's coming off the World Championships. He's going to be there. We got categories for all abilities. We got distances for all abilities. We got live music. We got prizes from Castelli. We got prizes from, once again, Nut Butter. We got all kinds of fun stuff going on, and that just starts the series. We're going to bring it back with the Gravel State Championship in Prattsburgh the following weekend. Anthony Clark will be there. Jeremy Powers will be there. It's going to be phenomenal. And then we are going to round it all out with a brand new race, the Hills of High Tour, and a new course from the man, Andy August. So get registered, get signed up, and get ready, because those spring classics are coming your way, and you're not going to want to miss what we got for 2019. You can hit them all on Bike Reg. You can register for all three events through the Dirty Bikes page on Bike Reg, or you can search each event individually and sign up for each one separately, so don't miss it. All right, so to the show. Today we have an awesome guest. I'm really jealous because I was sick the other night and I wasn't able to jump in on the conversation, and it was a killer conversation. We got Steve Cullen from the ButchBox Cycling team, who's also the focus of the film American Crit. If you haven't seen this on YouTube, go to YouTube and watch it. It's awesome. He's the guy who they focus on throughout most of the film. So he came on the show and he talks a little bit about the background of that and what happened with that film and sort of how that came about, which is really interesting, but also just his passion for crit racing in general. He's a really interesting guy. I love him. He's a lot of fun to listen to. I'm really jealous I didn't get to talk to him. I'm hoping he's going to come on again so that I do get a chance to talk to him. But he and Todd had a great conversation. They did a nice job really capturing sort of the passion and the history of the crit scene in the U.S. So it kind of continues our crit theme here for the last two episodes after coming off of a great interview with Trimble. So check this guy out. He's a great guy, very cool, lots of fun. Hope you enjoy it.
You'll never go out on a training ride and dig that deep.
Awesome. We won gold.
They're life rides.
I'm like, dude, I'm still figuring this out.
Lose sight of the fact that it's whoever goes faster.
This isn't a road race. This isn't a mountain bike race.
The sensei of sprint, Todd Shesky.
My eyes are coming out of my head. Just get in here.
All right. Well, tonight we have Steve Cullen with us of ButchBox, and really excited to kind of hear his perspective. And I know he's got a new team together recently, and there's been a video out and a lot of buzz about what's going on. So really excited to have you on here tonight, Steve. So thank you for taking some time out of your chaotic and crazy schedule.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on, guys. I really appreciate it. I love talking about bike racing, so it's great to be here.
Yeah, I think we both fall into that, right? I mean, it becomes this passion, and it's always great to be able to just talk about it with people. So,
Awesome.
Yeah. So Tony's out a little. He's on a little sick leave tonight. So this is going to be it'll be just us two. And but let's dive in a little bit. And,
yeah.
So give me a little background on where did you start with cycling? And this is not obviously a new passion for you. So give me a little bit of your history and how that kind of morphed into
Super
and
short.
what
Yeah.
what sparked ButcherBox.
Yeah, it's great. I think the ButcherBox, so the ButcherBox cycling team, the ButcherBox Sports is in its second year, but you could probably say it was like 3 years in the making on that. And we started to work officially with ButcherBox, like I said, probably maybe 2 years ago. It's in our second year, and the program's just getting to its mature level now. That all came from I did kind of come to bike racing later in life and started on the track, and then I've been an athlete my whole life, and I raced track and field throughout high school and college, and then left sports, ballooned up to like 230 pounds of like fat disgustingness, and then
Right?
was like, yeah, and I either need to go full Jabba the Hutt and like just eat stuff out of like a wet jar for the rest of my life, or I need to like completely transform. And at the time, it was like the Lance Armstrong craze. And I was like, bikes look incredibly hard and dangerous and beautiful, and I should probably do that. so, so I got into that, and then from there, it just kind of grown. And I think I've always really been interested in team dynamics and being in high performance environments. And so as I kind of progressed through the sport, more and more and more, I found it really difficult to get to be on a program that had a lot of hot, like-minded people that were really passionate about racing and really had a high performance mindset. And so I thought the best way to do that was to start to dip my toe in and start to build a team and program that kind of put me around all those people and helped me go into this crazy sport that I love so much. Along the way, I just really developed a passion specifically for American bike racing, and through Faster Days and some journalism and design and so forth, I've kind of just gotten more and more involved in the U.S., what I would call the American speed scene from that, and then the team is an extension of that. And I guess that's where it's kind of grown from in my athletic background. But I'm sure I can get into other aspects of it. But that's where that team came from.
Right. Okay. And you mentioned in there, kind of a really specific passion of mine. And since Tony's not here, I can feel free to delve into it now. You mentioned some track in there as well.
Yeah.
And what was did you start with track cycling or did you start with
Yeah,
road?
that's exactly it. I ran. It's funny, it wasn't a leap of genius. I was like, I used to go around in circles running, so maybe I should just go around circles on a
Sure.
bike. Yeah, and I didn't even know what crit racing was when I first got into it. And I started on the track. My home track was the Jerry Baker Memorial Velodrome in Seattle, which is a super robust program. If anybody knows anything about track racing in America, they have a massive program. They host the Marymore GP. They're just a great thing. And so I hooked up in that crowd and really got addicted to it. And the speed and the precision and all that stuff I felt really at home from there. And I think the only thing that really kind of fried me on that is you're kind of showing up on the same boards all the time, racing basically the same 20 guys year after year, except for the big events. And so no offense to those guys, but I just started to realize that the world was a little bigger, and came across, everybody should watch this. I came across this crazy little documentary shot by Jamie Palmietti on the Net Zero team, which was Hilton Clark's first pro team. Hilton Clark has already had his career and retired.
Right.
But
Yes.
it was called the Hard Road. This thing called the Hard. Yeah, do you remember this?
I have that DVD. Yes.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's on a DVD, right? Like, there's a whole bunch of people listening right now that are trying to go to it on Netflix, and I was like, homie, like you can't
Oh,
get it.
it was really, it was a really cool, real kind of gritty video of just really the underdogs, not completely unlike what you're trying to do with ButcherBox, and so
Holy
maybe there's
crap, dude! You just like looked into like the psyche? Yeah. Like you watch that movie and you'd be like, holy crap, all of this makes sense now.
yeah,
It's,
exactly. Yeah.
what I saw in that movie was it was super broy alpha male stuff, which is take it or leave it, but there's a part of that I really like. I really like, and I
Right.
think
Right.
there's a part of all of us that wants to do some club swinging, teeth gnashing, bear wrestling, fight to the death I think we're hardwired genetically to want to express that stuff, and sports is a great way to do it. And crit racing is one of those. And when I saw that film, I was like, I just looked at that and I was like, it's like watching a documentary on big wave surfing. It's like so dangerous and so hard and and so noble, because you're only basically doing it for the love. And there's some sort of crazy nobility in doing things that no one pays attention to really, really hard.
Right.
And
Well,
I was like, I want in. And then started to move from the track onto crits from there, and just realized this whole other level of skill and culture, and that really opened me up to the road culture at large, and I was drawn into that. And I started to watch World Tour racing from there, and really got into the European scene, which I still love. Everybody thinks that I hate European racing because I evangelicize like American racing so much, but like I watched the World Tour, like I love the Spring Classics. I just watched La Semiana, like, you know what I mean? Like I love that stuff. But but it wasn't really connecting with me, like what I was doing in a race and what was going on whatever I was internet hacking at the time, was like two separate things. And it wasn't really applicable. And then it just struck me, and I was like, there's this whole other subculture going on that no one's really talking about or celebrating. And I literally quit my job and then followed the racing around the country, like within 6 months.
Yeah, that's a pretty huge commitment, for sure. And how was that in relation to, were you racing on a team at that point? Were you racing solo, and you just said, "Look, I'm just going for it. I'm hitting these big crits, man. That's it. I'm just doing it."
Yeah, I think there was a bit of that. I think from the movie The Hard Road, which is probably going to get a crazy like sales hit that they won't understand from this podcast.
Jamie will
like,
appreciate it, right?
like I want a residual. You better send us all 5%, homie. So I saw that, and it was Athens is all I remember. You know what I mean? And then I went online and I looked for the history of American crits and got 0 back and said, "What the fuck?" And I was like, no one's talking about this stuff. And then it's like this ninja shit. Like you have to like go up onto the mountain and find like the dude in the cabin, and then he'll tell you about the race. You know what I mean? It's like no one was teaching you how to race these things. No one was talking about how it worked. And so I was like, oh, you have to like find the people that tell you where the races are, and then they have to tell you how to race them, because everybody talks about road racing and no one was talking about crit racing. And I was lucky to come up with this amazing program in Seattle, led by, at the time, Todd Harriet and Dave Richter, who are coaching and racing geniuses, and they're behind the strength and conditioning for many of the World Tour teams that you see now. And I don't want to get them into issues and go and label those out, but they work with some serious hitters. And those guys built a program that really created a camaraderie and like a teeth-gnashing, hard-nosed, smosh-mouth version of bike racing that I instantly gravitated to. And they were like one of the progenitors of like the all-black murdered out bike kit race teams that have come and gone since. And they really showed me into that. And then they started to explain to me who the hell Gord Frazier was, and like what the early crit scene was, and what was there in the American League before it came, and what was on Mercury and then Saturn. And all of this stuff is like word of mouth lore. And so there's only so many of these things that you can hear about before you're like, I have to go see what the hell is going on here, Right, and like, I have to go see these races, and I have to go see what's going on. And since then, I've become kind of a de facto historian on American crit racing, and really got into the lore of it as much as the experience of racing it. But for me, it was those guys. It was Dave Richter and Todd Harriet. And I've had many incredible mentors and athletes, younger than me and older than me, along the way. And I was lucky enough to even ride and race and learn from and train with Steve Tilford for a while, like all these legends of the sport, and R.I.P. Steve, and so I just really instantly connected to that legacy of that, and started to take a phenomenal amount of pride in the speed scene as different than the road scene. And that means track and crits and on a 6-day level, and then now a fixed gear level. And then I started to connect more with the bike messenger alley cats, of which I've raced dozens of those, and was just like, these are my people. It's the same type of aspect. There's a subculture to it, but they're speaking to the elements of danger and risk and stuff that I really connected more with. So I was very lucky to get into that. But the beauty of our sport is it's all there, man. And like, you just have to dive in and find the people and ask the questions. And like, it's all right around the corner. It's just like surfing. It's just like, it's right there. You just have to know where to go, you know?
See, and it's interesting to me because I started 34 seasons ago, right? So, right. So it's been a so when you start talking back to like Mercury team and Saturn, it was like I was racing those Pro 1-2 races then. And so I was in it already, and for me it wasn't a foreign thing, right? You're like it's all right there. It was there. I mean, because I was in the middle of it, so it didn't seem like it was unavailable. Like, what is this thing? Because as you know now, when you're in it, it seems like it's everywhere. And so it's interesting to hear from your perspective there of coming into it later and saying, what is this thing and how do you race these things? And I was racing them back in the late 80s.
Right.
So
well, you know what? There was actually a height of that too. You were there at a height like that had just like clipped the wave where all the European pros had come back, right? It was in the generation that was post 7-Eleven that was coming back now to like help raise and start teams. And so there was a big professional wave that you were part of. But the fact of the matter is there wasn't the media to make that accessible. Right. Like it was still like its own insular universe,
Right. And it was even especially hard, like when you talk about like trying to figure where are these races and what is all this stuff. And I look at it now as like the information is so accessible and easy because we have computers. I remember like this is it really dates myself going back to say this, but when we used to wait for like Velo News, which was more like newspaper, right?
Right.
And you'd have to wait for the monthly publication. You go back and you look in the back because that's where the races were listed. And you'd just talk amongst yourselves and be like, hey, there was this. It was like the classified ads of races, and then you'd have to have a photocopy of a USA Cycling release, and you'd mail that in.
Yeah.
And and if you were late, you'd FedEx it, and that was how you pre-registered for races.
Yeah, man.
You know, so. It was so inaccessible, and to try to figure stuff out and try and I had some good mentors that were like, oh, this race is good and that race is good, and you want to try to go to Somerville. I'm like, hey, what's the Somerville thing?
Right.
But I just kind of walked into it as being from a kid, and I just figured I didn't know because I was a kid, and there was no internet. So so it's interesting even coming in later that you still kind of experienced that same.
It's only recently the Renaissance kicked off 5 years ago. That's it. We're in high crit renaissance right now. Like we're pretty much like we're like in 3 to 5 years, it's gonna like zenith, like you can feel it that the interconnectivity between multiple cities, like what's going on in Berlin, what's going on in London, what's going on in Australia, all the like Melbourne and Sydney there. And like what America has really owned up to and taken on in that, like it's creating a collective cultural momentum like any other political movement or anything like that, right? Like a fashion movement or a music scene. It's like it's got the tools now to feed and support itself socially. And so why people are doing all this is for a culture, right? Like that's why they're doing it. They're doing it for a thing to give a shit about. Like, like it's gonna be like, I'm wicked into like toast, so I'm gonna join like the Toast League, and like we're gonna like butter rye bread, and then we're gonna butter wheat bread, and then like I'm super into toast, man. It's like, but you were like a toast freak 10 years ago, but like now you can find all of your other toast people, like in the world. And I think like that's really helped race promoters, and that's really helped people get into it. And I think surfing culture deals with the challenge of this, like the explosion of board sports. They're all crying about the overcrowding of their favorite spots, and to a degree, the price of progress, right? or if they call that progress. But I think, more people in the sport makes it more exciting and elevates the competitive level and makes it more of an interesting dynamic thing. And then you just have to look elsewhere for the private aspects of it. But like, I think people need to know. That's why I was like, that's why when you're talking, I was like, preach it, brother. Like, people need to know that this has like a powerful history that goes back 100 years. And
Absolutely. I mean, some of these races, I mean,
go ahead. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, you look at like Somerville is one of the longest running criteriums in the country, and it was started. It's back in the 50s.
Right.
Earlier. Yeah. Actually, I mean, World War II.
Right after it got paused for World War II, and
Mm-hmm.
then was a memorial for his son. Right. So then it's the longest. So that and the Redmond Derby days in Washington have the same official start year, but Somerville has more consecutive races. So that's considered the de facto oldest race, but it's actually tied for race year. And the original records of the dates are lost, so it's difficult to know which one was actually first at that time period. But those are that's why those are there. And then Fitchburg is third, and then there's like a bottleneck between like 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th. And then there's a huge gap until the 80s start picking up because so many of the races failed along the way,
Yeah, it's always been that tough model, and those have stuck around. And when you go to those races, I mean, even like Super Week, and I don't know if you had the chance to race Super Week out in Wisconsin.
Yeah. Well, it's now towed. It's towed now. So Super Week, those guys don't know like that. So they used to race European. So they raced European UCI crits. That's all you grew up racing, right? A crit was 100K. That's what a crit was.
Oh yeah, there was no UCI didn't recognize criteriums, and a funny little thing is up here I'm up here in Rochester, is our Rochester criterium, which is now
beautiful, gorgeous race. What a gorgeous race.
Yeah, hopefully you're going to be there this year too. Yeah, it's a great atmosphere, but we were the first UCI criterium in the United States. Like,
right.
We applied, and everybody was like, "How did you guys get on the UCI calendar?" I said, "Well, I was doing the race director for Scott Page, and we got talking like, oh, let's submit an application. They want UCI races. We'll put it in there. Like, we don't do criteriums, but maybe and we put it in there, and next thing you know, we're on the calendar."
Yeah. So, well, I mean, you and I both know that somewhere the document that says World Criterium Championship will eventually go back onto someone's desk. Like that thing's been floating. You know that there's a plan in a document somewhere floating around that is about that. You know what I mean? Because it's been talked about on the inside. It's talked about all the time. There's anywhere between 26 and 37 countries every year that have a national championship.
Mm-hmm.
So there's plenty of crit friendly places enough that if you put it on the calendar, if you put a criterium on the World Championship calendar, so it's criterium, road race, TT, triple T, that was Worlds, you'd get it. The difference is, I think the reason why they struggled on the UCI is because like 150 guys at UCI level fitness, you'd have to make the course so insanely technical it would be dangerous. Or what happens is that the races would be too short to have anything happen, So you probably, what you'd have to do is say that a national crit team, like a world champs crit team, can only be 4 riders long, and you probably have to do like a bracket system. It would be like 90 minutes. It would be something like like 70K or something like that, and then you'd have like bracket system that moves you on. Some way. I've talked about it a few times, but like it's doable. You just would have to it would literally be formatted somewhere between like a track scratch omnium. You know what I mean? Like, and obviously a full-on road race, right? So there's probably some level of round robining that will lead to that. But like, I'm sure there's a world championship. Like, I don't know why they wouldn't want to do that. When you look at the global scene, like, why would you not recognize that that's a whole genre of scene? It's just like saying that like BMX isn't legitimate. We only recognize cross country as the only way to be on a mountain bike. It's just like, that's not true. And I don't know why they don't make that same choice like when it comes to road racing. I just don't
Well,
know.
I think, you go back to tradition, and, UCI has been very, very Eurocentric in their thinking.
Yeah,
Right? And
yeah,
so, it's been road races. It's been, I mean, kermesses are the closest they kind of get,
yeah, right, right.
to what we do. But you look at,
Right.
like, Australia has their festival criteriums,
Yeah.
and, and of course they're big here. And then you look at the success of, we just talked recently with about Red Hook, right? And you
Oh
look at
yeah,
the
great.
success in Europe of Red Hook, and the fact is that now you have mountain e-bike, a UCI, right? They're having a world championship mountain e-bike. If you're
What
having
the
mountain
fuck?
e-bike world
Yeah,
championship, criterium is around the corner. I mean, it's
yeah,
got, because it's an accepted discipline, and really it's not. And I'm just, it's not something I've really, it was interesting. You're kind of bringing up these, how you would configure it, but really it's not a whole lot different than configuring it like you do scratch races or points races on the
yeah,
track.
yeah.
Um,
Yes, it
you
would
know,
be that. Yeah, that's
you
the
limit the number of guys for the size of
right.
the course, and you say, look, the course has got to be 2K minimum and no more
Yeah,
than 3K or whatever. And then you just,
yeah,
that holds 100 guys or whatever that is. And then
yeah, right,
you have to have a certain number of UCI points in criterion, blah, blah, blah. And
right.
you could pull it off pretty well, right?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, smart. Yeah, right.
so, but
Yeah,
it was just the other day that you were talking, saw the news about the mountain e-bike, and I'm like, well, if you can have mountain e-bike, you can have criterium world championships.
yeah, yeah. I think that'd be super exciting. And it would just add it. I think there's a level that I agree that like the format, like I like when they experiment with certain things. Like what was that race last year that they had an experimental format? It was a world tour race, but it had like a weird, oh, I forget. It's a V word. There's a V word for it. They called it a V thing.
Oh
I can't
man,
remember. It was
I
like 3 days. Do you remember what it was? Do you
no.
even remotely
What
know?
was the format supposed to be? I'm just trying to get an idea what you're speaking.
I can't remember. I can't remember. It had like a pursuit race. It was like a pursuit race, and it was like a points race, and it had like a pursuit race, and then oh, I'm blowing it. Never mind. There was an alternate format race. It's going to come to me the second we hang up. There was a World Tour alternate format race last year that got a lot of attention, but was really, I could not get over how little the Europeans paid attention to it, and how like God bless the cycling podcast, like God bless it for everything that those guys do to help dramatize the sport and bring people inside it. But they are so Europeanly insanely horrified of change in any way, shape, or form that like they couldn't wrap their heads around a thing that wasn't a point-to-point road race, and like they effectively just you could hear their desire to keep things the same, which is nuts because they also really champion women's cycling, which
Right.
according to a traditionalist should not exist, but is obviously the way of the future. So like I think alternate format from a spectator standpoint is really there. I think from a media standpoint, there's just like not an acceptance of it on the world stage, of which I say, who gives a fuck? Like, let's just do our own thing, right? And I think that's what's happening. And now you look at Europe and they're like copying our cyclocross, they're copying our fixed gear races, and now they're starting to even do more American style crits. And it's like, yeah, just like it's a whole wave that just got to go the other way. I say a world criterium championship. Whew, what do we want to
Well,
call? What do we want to predict? What are we going to
well, I
predict?
mean,
How many?
and think about, you talk about like the wave, and it's an interesting way, an interesting perspective of that, right? And you say like the wave is kind of pushing over into Europe, right? Well,
Yeah, yeah,
and you look at like the fact that most teams are riding American components,
right.
uh, right? They ride
Yeah,
American wheels.
yep,
Half the frames now are American made,
right.
American branded, right? So it's pretty crazy that America leads the technology that the Europeans are racing on, that
Right,
the world's racing on,
right.
and and then you go back and talk about, kind of tie that back to, you go back to this whole history of cycling, and cycling was this huge thing in the 6 days, way back. And that's where
Right.
the Madison comes from.
Right.
I
That's
mean, we
literally
were
where
the
the Madison.
leaders
It
in
was
bike,
Madison Square Garden.
right?
Yeah,
So
it was
so
Madison Square Garden, and we had Major Taylor, who
yeah.
was like the Michael Jordan of his era. You know?
Exactly. So we have this huge history in America. We kind of exported cycling. Europe continued and developed this whole tradition around it, but it came from here, really.
Yeah, yeah.
And
And I
so
think
to start that over again is, it's like, it's almost like the circle is complete now, right? Because it's like
yeah, it's really
we
interesting. I didn't think of that, but it's true. I think it's time that it gets reinvigorated in this way. And again, this isn't like death to European racing. It's just that there's something else now, you know? And yeah, and I think you're exactly right. I think it's ready for, I think athletes themselves, it starts with the athletes. And I think the athletes are really into, you know, especially speed racing for a lot of reasons, right? Like you don't have to do outrageous miles to be a great crit racer. You know, you have to be extremely fit, but you don't need to do monstrous miles. You can bang it out in a weekend. You can bang it out on a Wednesday night. You can take your family to it. It's easy to watch. It's like all these things, right? It transforms marketplaces. You set it up. It only takes a 1-day permit. It's like blah, blah, blah. All the reasons why it took off in an urbanized America in the post-war era, right? And it's like, I think athletes and people are doing that. And I think what's happening is they're looking for more and more ways to do that. And then with that, that's going to draw, what it's going to take is private interest. I mean, all of this takes private interest, which is why USA Crits is amazing. Also why the Netherlands, you know, the NL Crit series is amazing. Why Red Hook is amazing. Why USA Crits, I think, is going to transform the planet within the next 5 years. And then also why, like, even Rad Race out of Germany, why all these private groups are the ones that are going to create these brands that give people a way to follow and participate in the sport and generate the economic models around that stuff that's going to make it take off. It's not going to be like governing bodies are only concerned on things that have Olympic rings on them. Like that's really what they're there for, you know? They're there to develop talent for Olympic development or world championships, arguably, but on like that global stage. So they can't do this other stuff, and that's got to fall to private entity. And now in the entrepreneurial era that we have, you know, where it's Etsy and Squarespace and beyond, I think, you know, somebody like Trimble can explode and build a brand out of a hobby. And I think all these other guys, I mean, Rad Race is just a bunch of kids screwing around, and that thing is awesome. So, you know, I think that the infrastructure is there to let private interests really fall where the people want the sport to go, not where the governing bodies want it to go. And so that's why I think it is, and I think I can go on and on and on about it, what I think the political importance of criterium racing is. Like, I think it's profoundly politically important that we have crit races for a huge amount of reasons, but I can get into that at some other time. But that's all.
Yeah, we can open up a 2-hour podcast about
Yeah.
But yeah, I think there's you know, and it is a point on the, you know, the NGBs, your national governing bodies, and yes, and that is their kind of their commission, because they fall underneath the Olympic Committee,
right?
As you know, that Olympic umbrella. But it also makes me think when you say that, you know, that's their motivation and they're trying to get for the Olympic rings, and like that's true. And then you look at things like they do like in track cycling, where like they took the kilometer away, right? And it's like, so all of a sudden you have this thing that everybody's been focused on, and they just say, yeah, we're not doing that anymore because, well, we don't have enough time in the schedule. We're putting BMX in. You know, and sports change like that, and so it really disrupts from an economic model. Like if you're kind of driving towards these things, all of a sudden it's like, well, if you're a really good kilo rider, you kind of just lost your way.
Yeah.
You know,
well, you know, let's also people. Yeah, I also have a reputation for reasons beyond me that like I hate tradition, and that's not it. Like I think that the hour record should be the hour record. I think that they should continue to have the Tour de France. I think that the kilo should be there, right? Like because those are like the mile in track and field. These are the barometers of the evolution of humanity. You know what I mean? Like we should never get rid of the 4-lap mile, you know, like the 1500 makes sense. I get it. But like you should always have a mile, right? And like the marathon should stay the marathon, and like the kilo should stay the kilo, and the hour should stay the hour, because these are our literal physical connections to the heritage of our sport. And that type of fabric, that type of social fabric is super important to human identity. It's just super important, right? And it adds that weight and gravitas to our everyday behaviors when we feel connected to those things, right? So like racing a kilo connects you to every human being that's ever raced a kilo in their entire lives. And you can compare your time relatively to others and so on. So that stuff is super important. Like, I don't think they should change the 100 meters in track and field and suddenly do a 93 meter, like, because it's cooler. You know, It's like, it's just like you should have, there are these benchmarks. Now you can add those benchmarks and transform other things. But like, I think that level of continuity is super, super important, and human ritual is like really important to us, and it allows us an entry point and an understanding and a sense of continuity and purpose to our sport. So I think that's really, I mean, that's part of the hit, like that's why history matters to human beings, right? So I would say like they're just breaking the question instead of answering it better, right? So they're like, oh, they think that the answer is a time frame. That's not the question. The question isn't a time question. The question is like a value question. And so like, is it worth the value of adding BMX? Yes. You know, like not should we preserve the time structure? What the fuck kind of that's like such a wayward way to evaluate the whole process of what they're doing, especially because the Olympics is purely fucking symbolic. It's the most useless piece of shit ever economically. It destroys cities. Like the Olympics collapses economic systems. It is like anathema to growth, right? You know?
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I think you bring up a kind of an interesting point there too about that those connection points, and I think as much as we want to see change, we want to see evolution in sport, and we want to see new things, and we and recognizing what like criterium wasn't around before, but there was various incarnations of that as well,
Right.
And so it's an evolutionary thing, but having those connection points with a kilo and doing things like the hour record, and it does it because it's these standards that you can weigh yourself against all
Right.
those that came before you and say, hey, this is part of the evolution is how much can you do in an hour, or how fast can you do a kilo, and
Right.
those types of things, and I think you're absolutely right when you start talking about a time frame. It's like nobody cares about time frame. The Olympics, it takes 2 weeks as it is. I mean, what's it going
Right.
to matter?
I just don't understand that. Yeah, and I think that's the thing that we were saying, that I think what you and I were saying before before it cut for a second was just like, I think we were saying that the Olympics is a symbol of human connection. Like that's really what it is, and like if we set down our differences and stop going to war with each other and like actually get together and hang out, we can compete, and through the precision, through the crucible of competition, reveal things about our humanity that's good and bonding for all of us, right? So the Olympics is a purely symbolic event. That's all it really is. And I think one of the things that we were saying that's awesome is like, I think the Olympics, it doesn't get much cooler than having a kilo gold medal and like a BMX freestyle gold medal in the same Olympics. I would say that the founders of the Olympics probably would think that was cool. Maybe that's a sweeping statement, but like, I think that's the coolest thing, because it shows how humanity has progressed over time and what's interesting to it. And I would hope that the Olympics have a sense of continuity to it, like 100 years from now, if we're all still here and haven't like blown each other up, then I think the Olympics should have another. So what if they have to extend the Olympics for like 15 days instead of 12 or whatever? Like, are you kidding me? Like, it's worth it, right?
Right.
It's like, it's already insane. It's already
Right.
an insane undertaking.
Yeah, and a lot of the sports aren't. I mean, they're not using the same venue, and so what's
Right.
really the difference? I mean, and having some continuity of events, I think, is really cool, and and then and from a person standpoint, I don't like the way they changed the international omnium, but that'd be a whole podcast too.
Yeah,
so.
that's a whole thing. Or if we wanted to talk Olympics, they got rid of wrestling. Are they fucking insane? Like, it's the first sport ever. It's like, what are you guys doing? Like you need to throw a spear, punch each other, and wrestle. Like, that's sports. And like run really fast in a straight line. Like, that was the first Olympics, and then you got rid of it. Those guys, they're a mess. But yeah.
I was going to say is I wanted to hit a little bit on the touching off of the movie The Hard Road that you had mentioned.
Yeah.
And there's some similarities to the short movie that you guys produced for your ButchBox team. And I'm not sure exactly when that came out, but it's still a pretty hot topic out there. So maybe give us a little bit of background, like what inspired you to do the short movie, and then what was your intent behind it, and kind of where was it that you wanted to, what was it that you were trying to convey through that movie? And then let's talk a little bit about the controversy surrounding that.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I guess that's ultimately how we arrive here. So yeah, there's actually a couple things that are like super easy to clear up on that. Not that there's anything that to be cleared up, but people don't really know the story of that. It was so I had a friend of mine, well, a guy at the time I didn't know. This guy Simon. Simon runs Attack Pictures, which is he's based out of the Midwest. He's a director and a filmmaker, and he started a small little label on his own called Attack Pictures, and he started going to bike races and filming them because he wanted to work more independently, and so it was like a side project for him. Through the various Instagrams, I came across a couple of his films, and it was pretty cool, and I followed him and said, hey, I'm glad you're following the sport. It's great. You should check out races X, Y, and Z, right? Like I was just like generally ambassadoring, right? Like here's someone who cares about the sport, does that. And I was like, hey, if you're new to it and you like filming it, I can tell you these are the ones you should definitely go to, right? And he was like, thanks, bro. What's up? Cool. And then he said, hey, I'm heading to Gateway. Are you guys going to go to Gateway Cup? And I said, actually, yes. Do you want to follow the team? Like, so you can see what it's like behind the scenes. That was it, man. Like, that's what it was. There was no grand plan. It was this guy was interested in seeing what this crit scene was all about. And we connected through Instagram, and I said, hey, you can pop in and follow along with our team. It's cool. It's like, we got a little bit of a story. It's like a ragtag group that we've cobbled together. And so far we've like won some races, have a jersey, and could finish on the overall podium. And he's like, cool story. And I was like, come on down. That was it, man. Like we didn't talk or anything from that. And then we go down to St. Louis, and Simon, who is a sweet, sweet man and super passionate, and he showed up with a photographer, Patrick Daly, and then his DP, Neil. And those guys were kind of, there was an article on from Bicycling Magazine on our team that weekend. So we had photographer and this film crew just embedded with us for those 4 days. And they were just following us around. We had burritos together, drank beers, and they hung out and had a camera running. In one afternoon in our host house, he was like, can I sit everybody down for interviews, which is where the primary interviews was. So there was a single 3.5 hour, 4 hour stretch where everybody sat down. He set up the cameras, sat down, and then like instantaneously started to ask, and this isn't criticism, super deep questions about bike racing.
Right.
Like right away, and so like you go for your morning spin, you have races, like and like the next day is going to be the finals. There's people literally covered in stitches. One of my guys, Spencer, was racing on a broken leg. You know what I mean? Like it was like a fairly tough time. Like morale was high, but it was like last race of the year, pressure's on. We're kind of banged up. Let's just get to tomorrow and give it everything, right? So that's like our attitude. And then we go for a spin, have some coffee, come back, and then he pops on a camera and just starts talking to us, right? That's what the film is. Like all of that came from like a 3-hour session on a Saturday.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Awesome.
And so we had no idea, and we had no idea what he was going to do with it or what he was going to say or any of that stuff. It was just like, hey, he's passionate, and it was like a handshake of good faith, right? Like don't like make what you're going to make. You're an artist on your own, and you're going to make whatever film you want. And he's just here exploring the scene with us, right? So it was really great. And then we have photographers that show up with us every once in a while. Sometimes we ask them to come out. Sometimes they just ask if they can follow us, so you get pretty used to just people hanging around taking photos. So, which is cool, right? It's just part of the scene. Like every team eventually will have someone follow them and take photos, right? That's just part of what you do. So for all very good reasons. So then, we all hit it off. It was great. Obviously it was a heck of an experience, and Gateway Cup is an amazing event. And our boys did really well, and it was great, and it was an incredibly demanding year for me. I was starting a new job, helping grow a company, starting a team from scratch. I was like brutally sick and ill all winter, and so was like trying to race myself back into shape. It was just a hell of a hard year for me in life overall. So probably a lot of that came through, right? It's like a moment in time, and so that was what was going on behind that. So the key, the thing is like, we didn't produce that film. We didn't make that film. We didn't have any intentions. You know what I mean? Like,
okay. Yeah.
It's like Simon's artistic vision, which he's a good friend of our program, and I'm still very good friends with him. I mean, now I'm friends with him. Like, we text and share films and all that other stuff. But like, it was his vision of what was going on at that time, you know?
Okay, yeah. So, why do you think the controversy? I hadn't heard about it, and Tony had mentioned it to me, and I was like, nah, I kind of heard something about it, but I wasn't really paying much attention to it because mostly I got my head down with so many projects and things I'm trying to get done. So I'm like, I don't know, like what's going on, and I watched the same. I'm like, okay, so all right, so what's the big controversy? And so trying to read through some of the comments. So where do you think that's coming from? And
Yeah. So, I mean, so there's a lot of things. So there's a bunch of layers to what happens when people make statements, right? You know what I mean? Like, there's just layers of things that happen once you decide. You either do nothing and nothing gets said, or you do something and then things are going to get said, right? Like, that's life.
Sure.
You either hang out in the back of the dance, or you go up to the girl and ask if she wants to dance, and either she makes fun of you or says yes, right? Like so if you agree to be public in any way, which I have definitely agreed to be public since I was 14 years old, right? I've been getting interviewed for sports since I was a teenager, you know? And so I don't have an issue with that in my professional life, and I don't have an issue with that So having people like and not like things that you say is part of the game. So there's a level of that you just have to accept. And my guys had to accept, you know what I mean? Like, my guys had to accept that, like, people are going to say positive and negative things because you're in public, right? And when you do stuff, you cause reactions, and that's life. And I've been a journalist before and literally received mailed handwritten death threats from like the Aryan nation. You know what I mean? Like white supremacists have threatened to kill me and lynch me. Like, so I'm used to people not liking the things that I say because of that, right? And I think, like, literally, like this happens all the time, and I don't have it nearly as tough as LeBron James. You know what I mean? Like,
Sure.
or like Taylor Swift just gets hated. Like, why? No one knows. You know what I mean? It's like, or like, people hate Nike, who gives bazillions of dollars to like sports communities and stuff like that. You know what I mean? Like, you do stuff and people react. So there's a whole layer of that. Within that context, you have to accept that if people weren't talking about what our team was doing, I would say ultimately we're not doing it right, because I'm not interested in the status quo. I'm interested in doing something special, right? And like, I'm interested in helping other people achieve greatness. And like, greatness is by default abnormal, and abnormal is different, and different will get noticed and cause reactions. People hate for a lot of different reasons. I think so that's the meta context around doing things. And like, it won't be the last time we get negative commentary or positive commentary. Like, it shouldn't be, and it shouldn't be for a very long time. I want our team to be in a rich, dynamic thing. I'm not building a team for safety, right? Like, that's not why it is. I don't want like a friction-free life. Ultimately, I want the good to outweigh the bad, but you're going to have friction along the way. So there's that. Then there's also then there's a level of, I'm just like an incredibly strong personality that I have no problem living in a very passionate way. And so that comes across. Now, when you look at what's going on in the film, if you're talking to your friends and then I pick out them any day of the week, you're going to say 5 controversial things. So if I had the transcript of your day, and then got it at the end of the day, I could publish 5 controversial things in a Twitter account by you that would make it sound really intense, right? So I don't blame the filmmaker at all, but they're choosing the juiciest bits and then putting them together. You know what I mean? So the stuff is without context. So when you look at it, yeah, there's a scene in there where I say, when I say, I literally say something like, you're not going to be there for your kid's birthday. You're not going to be there for other stuff, right? What that doesn't say is that came from a 10-minute answer in which we talked about the pursuit of greatness. I was referencing people like Einstein and Da Vinci and like all these others who literally weren't very good in their social lives and public lives because they dedicated themselves to changing mankind. And like, there's a price to pay for that. And like, I was also talking about like surgeons. Like, surgeons aren't really the greatest of people, maybe because they dedicate their whole lives to these things, or like it was a much more of a statement about what you got to be willing to sacrifice to be great. And I was saying that we share an element of that. But I don't blame a filmmaker for just taking that controversial, the most apex moment of that. When you look at the film, it's filled with nothing but apex moments. So it's really intense and very provocative, and it's super emotional. And like, it's like, so for some people that could be, they're judging it as a piece of art. So some people could say, I don't like that film, but then I'm the central protagonist, so therefore I don't like that guy. Or you hear those things and don't think about context, and you shouldn't. You're an audience. The audience shouldn't have to work too hard, right? And they're like, that guy's insane if he thinks I should miss my fucking kid's birthday to race a crit, of which I would agree, right? You know what I mean? So it's like, so it's an intense film about very intense things from an intense guy. And that's going to stir a lot of people up from that, On the same side, like there's like this famous meme out there. There's like Cat3 memes, right? And like Cat3 memes, like this guy did a great. Like Simon. I was like, Simon, this is going to get send ups, and he's like, yeah, it's okay. And I was like, okay, good luck, And like that guy posted a really satirical, funny thing, in which, of course, I get roasted on that because I'm a loud, brash guy, right? But then also, like, this is what people didn't understand. Like that thing filled into like 150 hate comments. I literally, not an exaggeration, not exaggerating. The thing I'm about to say is dead true. Got death threats in direct mail from people telling me I should kill myself and leave the sport. End quote. You know what I mean? Like, It went fucking crazeballs. It went fucking crazeballs. And so, to Cat3 memes credit, they were like, well, I was just satiring this guy. Like, I wasn't like trying to get hate like he took it down the next day. Because it was like he had the sense to be like, whoa, you fucking guys are crazy. And then on top of that, I also received, literally, our team received thousands, not hundreds, thousands of people saying, I love what you're bringing to the sport, right? So it caused strong reactions in either way, of which we had, we went and did a race in September, and then a movie came out in January, and then I watched it on opening night along with 35,000 other people and was like, oh, that's what got made. You know what I mean?
Right.
And then the next day I started getting DMs from people all over the country that I didn't know, which is great. And then all of a sudden, like a week after that, like I started getting death threats. And I was like, what the fuck? Like, okay, I get it. But like, whoa, I had to like stop looking at it because I was like, that's just public life. That's not me. Like, that's public me, and like had to just like keep it in arm's away. And so that it kind of turned into a crazy thing. But what it did was it helped create a surface area to talk to people, to talk to my boys, like I got to talk to my boys about what it meant to be a public figure and how to deal with public press and how to deal with controversy on that. And I had one of my riders say, hey, I'm just not you, like who shows up, like a guy who showed up in that film. And he was like, I don't know exactly how to handle this. Like, I've never been in the public in this way. And I've actually spent a lot of portion of my life kind of avoiding public opinion. And now I'm at the center of it. And it's like, it's true, but you've also chose to be an athlete on this team, and this team is only going to get more public, right? And so the key is learning how to balance the things you do out in the world as a platform and realize that when you push out into the world, it's going to push back. And I am a big believer over and over and over again that love conquers all. Love conquers hate. Love conquers racism. Love conquers bigotry. Love conquers evil. And if you just go out and bring positive energy to things, that will eventually make everything else look exactly like it is. Fearful, cynical, protective, insecure. That's what all happens, And I think positive confidence, it should be a symbol for people to follow and to tap into on their own. And not something to be afraid of. And I think we're just seeing human dynamics play out in a very specific instance, of which it's not going to be the last time. It's not going to be the last time. It was a bit hard on me, but it was also a bit rewarding to see the benefits of it. I had no idea I was going to be a central figure in that film. Do you know what I mean? Like, I did not know. It's like, I just didn't know. And then when it came up, I was like, wow, man, like I do a lot of talking in that thing, And it was like,
And I think there's also a part of that, and that's probably why I wanted to kind of delve into this a little bit. Was was what was the intent of the film? And I think and there's also part of that where you say, you're running a sponsored team, and it's a public thing that you want to have public, because that's the whole point of having a sponsored team is to drive marketing, right?
Yeah, right.
Getting those impressions and getting those marketing dollars rolling, and but also looking at that as saying that's a big risk to say an artist is going to do a film that I haven't seen, and I don't know what his intent is and what he's taking away from that. And that's a high risk thing to do, because like you said, it captured a moment, and it captures this moment of, like, I'm thinking back to, like, there's been various moments where I've not said things that I'm necessarily like, yeah, maybe wasn't really representative of the whole of my view. It was a
Right.
it was a
Right.
part of my view, and maybe I was, catch me, 300 meters after the finish of a really intense crit. I'm going to say some pretty intense stuff.
Right,
Um,
right.
that I remember a local race director one time. I was really upset. I was after this race, and they messed up with the last lap, and they didn't ring the bell. A bunch of stuff happened, right? So I wound up not winning the race, and it was stupid. But I like, okay, I come around the next lap. He goes, "What do you think of the race?" And I was like, and I'm good friends with him. And I was just like, it's probably not the best time to ask me. And he pressed me, and then I said things that I didn't want to say, and I wound up having to go back and apologize later.
Yeah.
I guess it was like, yeah, I was in this really intense moment. A lot of things were going on outside of my racing that had nothing to do with the race itself. It was just life stuff that was going on. And so all that fed into it. And then I had this like, you call these apex moments. I have this apex moment, like, I got all the stress going on, and then this race really stressed me out, and I was in a really high stress moment of, now I'm in, the final lap of this crit, and I'm not happy about what's going on. So I think, folding that kind of together, what you said is like, yeah, so we got a kind of a snippet of perspective, but not the whole thing. And so all of a sudden people are saying, well, Steve's advocating that I missed my kid's birthday, and it's like, not saying that, but you didn't have it, but you weren't trying to round out a perspective there either. It was this artistic take, and maybe that's also a kind of a good lesson even for the guys on the team, is being really aware that when you start creating this public thing of what you allow out and don't, and
Well,
how
yeah,
they can have
you raise a really interesting point. You raise a super, 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 super interesting point when it comes to brand building. Is I actually tell my guys to not filter shit, because that's what I don't want, right? Like, what I don't want is hate in any way. The only thing that's not allowed on this team is hate. No misogyny, no racism, no bigotry, none of that. I've kicked multiple guys off the teams for fucking stuff that they've said. I've been like, that is unacceptable. I'm not your dad. I'm not going to teach you how to be a grown human being. Get the fuck out. Right? So, like, there are unforgivable lines to cross, and that line is hate. If it's hate related, get the fuck out. Everything else is like, I didn't hire a bunch of choir boys. Like, this isn't church school. This is crit racing. Like, my boys are going to mouth off. Like, they're going to race bikes. I hope they don't get into fist fights, right? But, like, they're going to be who they're going to be. And I have some guys, I want people, I also owe it to my sponsors, my clients, ButchBox specifically, to advocate the things truthfully, right? So there's a level of, my guys use the products. I turned down clients until I found one that I liked. This client, I believe in this client. My guys use the products. I hired a team nutritionist to help them use the products. They advocate the products, all these things, right? Like, it's, did I just get bounced? I think I just got
you're
bounced.
here. Nope, you're good.
Okay, sorry. So I go through a long way so that those guys don't have to ever say anything they don't believe, right? So they when they talk about this stuff, they know what their products are, they know who our sponsors are, and they know what's good about them and how they can use them. And, like, they have a say on whether we work with people or not. Like, when I went to work with our sunglasses, on Roca, guys were like, I haven't used them. And then we got a case out and we used the things for 3 months. And then the guys were like, okay, I have these questions. And that's not a shill. That's saying that, like, everybody that we use has a real authentic relationship where the guys can speak freely of it. So, which is a little different what you're saying, but it also sets a meta context that I want my guys to speak freely, because that is what sports is about. Sports is about, it's not art. Sports is not art. Sports is not a thing that is crafted for your specific well, it's hard to say. I know that's hard to say. It's really hard to say that.
Because it is entertainment.
Yeah, it's interesting. As I was sussing that out, it's like it's very close to art because it is entertainment. But I guess it's performance art in the sense that you don't know what's going to happen. You agree to the parameters of the art performance as entertainment. I agree to this, but you don't know how it's going to play out. And that non-known play out is the thing that makes theater different than film, right? Like film, you shoot it until you get it right. In theater, you experience the performance firsthand, and sports is a less choreographed version of that. It's like improvisational jazz, right? Or like free form hip hop, or whatever, capoeira, right? Like you don't know if it's going to turn out right. So that's why we watch sports. So I want my boys to be the same. Like I want people to have a real connection to who they are and how they think and feel, and through that experience with them, have a greater, richer life. Like that's fucking sport. So like if they're not a loud, brash character, and not all of them are, like I have, Spencer Moevin Zeta, who is an outrageously gifted athlete and one of the toughest human beings you can possibly meet, is also really sweet and soft spoken. And frankly, like the dude just drinks hot chocolate, and that like sums up a lot of his life, like he's a really mellow, mild dude. So like whatever, the issue is he doesn't really say that much, right? And then I have other guys, like I got my boy Alex McLaughlin. This guy was like de-thawed from like a Neanderthal war machine. Like he is like a frothing alpha male, like he is so strong and so tough and so outspoken and so confident that like that's what, and I don't want him to not be like that in the public. Like I don't care if someone runs up and pokes a mic in someone's face, as long as they're not talking hate, as long as hate doesn't come out, like fuck that guy, fuck that thing, as long as there's no hate, it's all fine by me. You know what I mean? Like, because I want that human connection with our audience and fans, and I don't want to change that. You know what I mean?
Right. And I think there's always a certain amount of sport, and and I've certainly had my debates with people, especially when there's been some younger guys, and somebody will say, well, that guy, he's a little aggressive, or I'm like, well, you know what, when a young guy is a little aggressive, I'm like, that's good, because he's getting his teeth kicked in a bunch of times as he goes up the ladder, and he's gonna need a little of that cockiness, and he's gonna need a little bit of that in order to fight back from the fact that you're gonna get your soul crushed a bunch of times. So some of that I look at when young guys are like that, I'm like, that's good, because some of that gets kicked out of you as you go along. But I certainly, I also appreciate the fact that not everybody's like that, and they can still be a really gifted athlete and be a really talented bike racer, and maybe that's not how they come at it, but a lot of times, in order to be successful, and especially when you're talking about criterium or track racing or anything that's going to require that intensity, you wind up having to be an intense person. I mean, certainly Mark Cavendish has taken his lashings, right? For, they stick a microphone in his face, a minute after a sprint finish. He's an intense guy, but that's all, that intensity comes through in the racing. So that's really what I wanted to kind of get your perspective on that a little bit. And I think it helps to kind of round that out a little bit when people see the film and just kind of say, this is really, it's more of an artistic rendition. And it's not the whole of Steve Cullen. It's not the whole of ButchBox Racing. It's not just a bunch of guys going out there that are looking to like knock people down and hit people over the head with clubs and and be crazy. But it is more about passion. It is more about pursuit of excellence. Is rounding out that perspective, and I think it's important for people to see that. So
yeah, I would agree, and I would say that, and again, like the hate mail, I was kind of like, you guys are out of control, but like I understand that I understand if people think that some of the things that I was saying was particularly over the top on that, and like for sure, for all the reasons we've gone over. But then I think one of the universally what I've gotten back from people that I race with, and I'm lucky enough to still be able to race with, in guys like Dan Holloway or Frank Travieso or, Joe Lewis and all these guys, I would get text messages back from them saying that, like, yeah, man, like that's what it's about. Like that's what it is. It's like, it's a really all in thing for the guys that want to do it great, and it's like and it is a lifestyle and it's really a committed thing. And yeah, you expressed it in a pretty extreme way, but it's not that none of those feelings aren't real. It's not that lifestyle, it's not like you're not talking about a real thing. And so to answer your original question, I think like when I was talking to Simon during those interviews and talking to him, that's what I was trying to convey to him at that time, was that it is, I don't regret a single fucking sentence, because it's all true. It's all true. Like it's all 100% true. Like it is all those things. It's not all those things all those times, but it is. And like for people that saw that, like if someone saw that and was like, it's not like that, I'm like, are you really doing it? Like, are you really doing the sport? Like, are you trying? Because if you're trying, it's a lot like this, because
I've said to people many times, and if you're anywhere near the front on the last couple laps of one of those national calendar criteriums, it's full intensity. It's no fooling around, and there's nobody's apologizing to anybody for sure. I've said to the guys that I coach, I'm like, you're not out there to make friends at the end of the race. You can be agreeable afterwards, but you're there to win the race. And there's an element of that, and not to take that out of context, and you don't want to be a jerk and make a name for yourself. You're not trying to put somebody in their curve, but you're there to race your bike, and you're there to try to win, and to try to do those things. And sometimes that can come off a little bit much for people, and maybe it's a little bit much for people that don't do it either. But and it's not to try to scare people out of the sport either. And I think that's a big problem for USA Cycling. I mean, with bleed membership, is we're not trying to scare people out of the sport, and say, wow, if you're just not intense like this, you can't do it. And like you said, you have a rider that's super mellow, and and that's his personality, and that can still be your personality, but it is going to attract a certain level of intensity, and you're going to need that intensity. You need the intensity for training, and you need that intensity when you're competing against other people. It's just part of.
I'm going to agree with you. I'm also just kind of like, I'm going to add this to that particular thing, that like, I'm not talking about bikes in that film. You know what I mean? Like bikes are like a great way to fight diabetes. Bikes are a great way for like poor, impoverished kids to get to school in countries that don't have public transportation. Like bikes are a wonderful way to like spend time with your mom and dad riding down to get a bagel. Like bikes are like a beautiful freedom machine. Bikes are a great thing to do in sunshine. Fucking racing? You don't sign up for a race to make friends. Like, you know what I mean? Like racing can be fun, but like, I am not afraid to say that competition, head to head, fuck you die competition is a bad thing. Like, are you kidding? Like what? Like these are the same people that cheer for the NFL, where they literally are killing each other on the field in front of each other. Like MMA is off the charts. So these guys go and cheer MMA and then yell at somebody for talking about bike racing like that. Like let's be clear. Fuck you die sports is good, and the world needs it, right? And let's be clear about what real competition is. If I respect you, I'm going to give you everything to kill you. Because you don't try hard at things you don't care about. Like you let a 6-year-old beat you at checkers, but you would never let your brother do that. You know, you try hardest to beat the ones you love because you respect them, because the stakes are higher, because it matters. So when I'm racing next to Zach Allison, I want to beat him. I don't want to hurt him. I don't want to crash him out. I don't want his business to go under. I don't want him to get a divorce. I want to kick his ass in a bike race. You know what I mean? Like,
right. And I think that's
different...
And that's the distinction. I think maybe some people kind of lost in watching that. Right? It was like they're taking that and extending that off the race course, and and I always said, like, some of the toughest competitors that I knew off the race course, they were ruthless bike racers, awesome guys to know.
Right.
And it's just like when we're racing bikes, They weren't going to let me squeeze through a spot, and yeah, maybe you get your wheel chopped or you get an elbow, but it's racing and it's okay. But it's when you can leave that behind and say, hey, the race is over and you can go have a beer. Awesome. Everybody competed hard, everybody tried hard, everybody did everything they could do within the rules. And like you said, you're not trying to kill somebody, put them under, get them out of business or anything else. It's all about winning a bike race. And I think maybe that perspective got a little lost in the movie.
For sure. And again, I don't fault people for that. That just wasn't a thing that was covered really at the time. And yeah, there's a lot of comments afterwards that were saying, like, what about all the fun? And I'm like, that's not what we were talking about. Like, we weren't talking about that.
Yeah, it wasn't meant to be a holistic thing. It was really a very focused kind of thing. So, well, we could probably we could podcast this thing for a day or take a long road trip. But I hope you guys are coming to Rochester.
Well, we have we can talk about that. We have our primary focus this year for my boys is on the US Crits calendar because it's just a great platform for our guys to shine. Sure. And we really like what Gene and Scott and Ashley are doing there. So that's the bulk of it. Around that, we have opportunities to do a few other things in there. And so we might do Toad. We might have some guys go to Mission Crit actually and do some fixed gear. And then we are looking at end of calendar races. So Rochester has got to be one of the most beautiful courses I've been on. The double bridges, the 180s, it's really a fantastic course. It just really has to do, I think like Rochester, Rad Race, Detroit Cycling Classic, these are places that like we're very interested to go because the culture there is so good around those races. And Rochester is just really just a fantastic course. The first time I raced it on the inaugural one back when it was NCC and fell in love with that course. It was just amazing and haven't been back since. So I don't know, man, maybe if you can get my guys an invite, I can do it because they will light that race up for you. So we'll see how it goes.
We'll talk some, and if we can help you guys out, we will, because I think you guys will add something to the race, and as you know, I mean, the spectatorship's been huge.
It's great.
It's such a great party.
I love it.
Great energy and atmosphere, and it really kind of fits what you guys are trying to put out there. So it'd be great if you could make it. So
awesome. Thanks so much.
Yeah. Man. But thank you for being on and giving us some of your maybe more well-rounded perspective on what you guys are doing and what the movie was about, and hopefully people kind of see that really kind of what you guys are really about, and kind of filter through some of the what was put out there in the movie sense, and not that it was not true, but it's not the whole truth. And being able to balance it, I think, is really key. So awesome having you on, Steve, and thank you for making the time to do that. And we're certainly going to be looking for your results and seeing what you guys can accomplish this year as well.
Yeah, thanks so much. I really appreciate you guys reaching out, and we'll help point some ears towards this podcast once you get up and running. Thank you so much.
Awesome. And if you come to Rochester, we're going out for a beer after.
Oh yeah. Well, the barbecue after the 180 is like pretty much the only place to go, right? I mean, like that's
right. But we'll find a spot. We'll kick back some nice cold beers afterwards and
yeah, man. Looking forward to it.
Awesome. All right. Take care, man.